It is an extremely exciting time for BFSI sector in India. UPI, which was launched in 2016, has created world's largest payment infrastructure. As of June 2021, 2.8 billion volume of transaction happened in India. India is leading when it comes to fintech revolution, and then we are all participating and seeing what is happening. Pandemic has accelerated the growth of cashless transaction. In fact, UPI saw a growth of threefold in the transaction volume. All this growth is being fueled by innovators, by entrepreneurs in the country who are leaving no stone unturned to go and build disruption in the fintech financial payment space. Today, I'm very excited to bring to you two people who have been the brains behind PhonePe, India's most comprehensive financial services platform, which actually saw more than 1 billion transaction volume on its platform very, very recently. PhonePe has disrupted the market and created a strong, loyal user base in India, especially coming from tier 2 and 3 cities. Let's talk to Sameer Nigam, who is the founder and CEO of PhonePe, and Rahul Chari, who is the CTO and founder of PhonePe. Rahul and Sameer, welcome to this conversation at Walmart Converge. Sameer, very excited to be talking to you. And as all of us watching this today and everyone who's viewing this live would know that we all as Indians feel very proud of PhonePe. You've crossed billion transaction on UPI. This is huge. This is big in our country, and congratulations to both of you. Just want to get a sense, how are you strategizing now? How are you thinking about the business, about the growth, about the fintech opportunity in India?
Hi Shraddha, it's been a while. I think this is about as exciting a sort of pedestal as we could have hoped to be 5 years into the company. We're processing now actually almost 1.5 billion transactions a month.
Wow.
But what's I think most exciting about the whole thing right now is 80% of all these users are tier 2 and beyond.
Wow.
So I know that payments for a fact has absolutely sort of started solving the financial inclusion problem. Right? Every other category that we know of, every sector, food tech, e-commerce, all of them started in the metros and been slowly working their way down. Payments has taken off in the heartland more.
Yeah.
We have about 20 odd million merchants. 16 of them are tier 2 and beyond. So where people actually had to travel more to pay their bills, where people were sending money to villages and small towns, all of that's happening on a phone. And 4 years ago, and we call this the Geo effect. 4 years ago, everything changed in India. Smartphones with cheap data have meant that basic services have all shifted to the phone. And I think what we are proudest of is that we played a pretty good role, a large role in democratizing payments-based transactions. When Rahul and I, when we used to be at Flipkart, I think by the time we left, which was in 2015, there's about 120 million people that were participating in the e-commerce economy, which of course has grown. Payments is already about 3.5 times that in 5 years. I think that's a stupendous story.
Yeah. And I have to call this out that, last conversation we had, you talked about the users in small towns and cities of India. Before I come to Rahul, I want to understand that when you're building, and we discussed this when you were talking about building product, because PhonePe today is a product which is talking to India and across to different tiers of India. How are you strategizing as you build for more users in our country?
I think we're trying to avoid getting into too much complexity. Keep it simple, right? Something like payments. If everyone understands cash, is because there's like 5 or 7 notes. They have different colors and numbers, and most people can understand them. Similarly, on PhonePe, if you see the homepage, from the day that we launched, money transfers at the top is the most primitive form of payments. Check balance, recharge, bill pay. A lot of the complex products, insurance, mutual funds, and other products are on secondary tabs, right? So first is just stay focused on what every Indian needs several times a day. If digital payments is going to take over, you got to make sure that everyone is able to understand, from their nephews and their nieces and their neighbors and their friends. Somebody should be able to teach them how PhonePe works in 5 minutes or less. That's typically been the way all the sort of iconic products have taken over, right? They're very easy to use. The WhatsApps, the Google searches, maps, a lot of these products. So that's one primary focus, is just decluttering as often as we can. The second is, I think, again, a lot of conversation around localization of content.
Yeah.
I think it's more relevant in categories where there's a lot of detail. In insurance, where you have to read a full policy, it may matter more. For a mobile recharge, it's a 10-digit number. Most people know it. They know the plan cost. We've had support for 8-10 languages now for 5 years. Less than 15% people choose another language.
Yeah.
What we have seen though on the customer service side, more than 50% of people call up and want to talk in their native language. And so you have to understand what India or Bharat really need. And I think they're not as simple as people think they are. And you have to say it's okay. I mean, if people want to use the app in English, but they want to talk to you in any language in the country, that's what you got to solve for.
Yeah.
So manic obsession on that.
You know, I wanted to ask this and call this out because 1.5 billion transaction is a huge number. And you guys slowly, steadily, and I shouldn't say slowly because in the last few years only, have done it. Put your head down, not come out for the news, but you've created news and you've created something which is such a benchmark made in India product, if I may call so, for Indians using it. And Rahul, that my question to you, this is a huge transaction number, and then what today PhonePe is serving, and also as India, we've grown, the number of digital citizens and digital transactions have grown. How do you look at tech when it comes to serving these huge numbers, and how do you look at tech at scale?
So I think one thing, as Sameer mentioned, right, our whole vision was to create this foundation on top of payments, and then on that deliver financial services to India. So from day one thing was clear. Given the infrastructural problems that we have in the country, tech is the only way that you can leapfrog. And secondly, if you're solving anything, the lens that you have to take is solve it at scale.
Yeah.
So for us, I think one thing is very, very clear. Whenever we take on any problem statement, we look at it from the lens of, can we scale this to the entire population, right? And we prepare for that almost from day one.
Wow.
In fact, we took a good 8 or 9 months before the launch, and were consistently working on the first version of the product with the lens that we'll be with 10 million, then 20 million, 30 million users within a short period of time. And that really happened. I mean, there was a catalyst in the demonetization event, and obviously UPI took off. But if we hadn't taken that view from day one, we would be struggling with trying to keep up with the scale that this platform, that is UPI, has actually created. So for us, I think that lens of scalability always comes from day one. Secondly, there is almost maniacal focus on trying to continuously improve at scale. So our payment success rates is a classic example, right? Today, if one thing is there about PhonePe that echoes with all the 300 million plus users that are there today, is the fact that the reliability of the transaction and the speed of the transaction. It's very easy to actually take a view that at the scale that we are operating at, we should be good enough. We'd never take that view. We still continue to plug away in trying to make our transactions faster and to ensure that the failure rate is still lower and lower and lower. So incremental improvements at scale actually is significantly underrated. Most of the time it's the new shiny next feature that everybody wants to launch. But actual incremental innovation is significantly more complex, but also significantly higher impact.
Yeah.
So we have this clear culture of saying that BAU and improvements on BAU are equal, if not more important than the next feature. Secondly, with a view of saying that now 80% of our consumers come from tier 2, every decision that we make has that lens to it. So like Sameer spoke about, using vernacular language in more innovative ways to ensure that muscle memory develops, and it's not just about translating instructions. In terms of trying to leverage technologies like computer visioning with financial services for insurance and claims. So there is this whole concept of how can we leverage tech to make the product much more simpler for tier 2, tier 3 customers who may be coming onto the platform for the first time on the internet, first through content, right? Obviously viewing free content or video content, but the next thing really ultimately ends up being payments before they move on to high value purchases or e-commerce. So there is a responsibility that we are actually catching this wave of consumers on the internet very early, and we need to be able to use technology through computer visioning, through augmented reality where possible, and simplifying the experience constantly at scale.
Yeah.
So I think that's what has kept us ahead, and that is culturally something everybody in PhonePe, not just the tech team, but the business teams and the operations team, that's how we operate.
Wow.
I'd like to add to that because I think one of the best things that Rahul and Burzen and the rest of the early sort of tech leadership did is not just in payments, but everything around. We took a view that we will have the lowest headcount possible. And it was a target both for the tech team, obviously, but for the business teams as well, saying your job is to make yourself redundant, which means that the automation level is very, very high. And you'll see this unfold in the next few years, but each of our systems, risk and fraud systems that no one even thinks about, you think of that as a compliance burden. We have one of the best risk and fraud platforms in the country. And we're starting to externalize things like that. We worked with Freshtest when Girish had launched the FreshPod. And we use it for more end-to-end automation than perhaps Freshtest does for their own systems. At least that's what they tell us. So I think we have stayed very, very lean. Our tech org, all the engineers at hand, I think is still sub 300.
350 now.
Wow.
So if you think of it just from that silly lens, I know it's silly, but that means the leverage you're getting for one engineer is 1 million users. Ballpark. Right? There's about 315, 320 million users. There's about that many engineers. And that tells you that you've actually got that equation sort of right. Because given our population, if you get into operations to try and scale, there is no way that people like us at least are not equipped to build 100,000 person offices and large operating teams. So I think that early maniacal focus has really, really helped. We are reaping dividends today because the automation level is still very high, which means the number of people who are in the decisioning side remain low.
Do you know, Sameer, but I have to ask you because there's so very few like you in the country who have scaled, and Rahul, both of you, how do you can have that vision, but execution of that at scale. Today you have the money, you have the resources, you can invest, but how have you stayed true every year to having lean teams and delivering? Because when you get into execution mode in India, especially, we can ki chalo hire kar le, let's get more people. How?
I think two things that we did early on that at least till now for the first 5 years put us in very good stead. We took the decision of merging back with Flipkart way early. It was a very controversial one. You remember we spoke about 5 years ago because we essentially merged pre-launch and everyone was asking us why. And the conversation that we'd had with Binny and the investors were that if we want to build something special, we want runway, but everyone here is constantly chasing some operating metric to get the next round of money, to then do the next thing. And the problem with that is that it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're constantly chasing vacuous numbers, been through that, too old to want to do that again. So we said, you know what, we want somebody who's giving us long-term capital. For the first few years, obviously it was Flipkart, now there's Walmart. So Walmart again, the first meeting we had with people like Judith and Stuart and Brett, they asked us for a formal 10-year plan. We were 2 years live. 10-year, and they hold us to it, by the way. And then I remember meeting with Mr. Penna and Stuart Walton and all. They're talking about a generational shift. So they're talking about 25 years, right? And I'm like, I haven't ever thought that far. 10, yes. 25 is ridiculous when you're in tech. Meeting with Mr. Penna and Stuart Walton, they asked us for a 25-year plan, and we'd never ever thought of a 25-year plan. They're talking generation at a time. So we've been lucky, we've had very patient capital, which means that the founders have been able to focus inwards. Culture, theme, process, all of it. Second thing, again, we got very lucky. I'd say amongst the first 50 employees, and many of them are part of the core leadership team, we had all worked together very, very closely. Many of them were ex-Flipkart. Some were other people that I had worked with or Rahul had worked with in other parts of our career. So when you have 40 to 50 people who are getting back together for a second run, you start with knowing each other's strengths and weaknesses, and you start with a very, very high trust and transparency model. Transparency more than trust. And I think when that happens and people are working together because they want to behave the same way, then it becomes endemic, right? 50 can influence 500. By 500, we found that we had to start putting down the culture and values on the walls because the 501st employee has heard about it, but they don't relate, and you're expanding across the country. So we had to institutionalize it, the tech orientation, the culture, the high governance. We've always said we want to play across financial services. You're going to be heavily regulated. So it's not like the Wild Wild West at all, right? There's going to be more sort of grey, balding people here, and that's not usual in the tech industry. So I think it's about timing. We again at an inflection point. We are now closer to about 3,000 employees, getting into a plethora of financial services. We will have to again shore up the leadership team and the org and behave differently. So I think we've learned over the first 15 to 17 years of our work experiences what works, what doesn't at different stages. Flipkart was a great learning ground, and we're trying to make sure we don't repeat mistakes we made in the past. And so far it's worked. But it's hard. It's hard scaling this fast, no matter what you do in terms of planning. There are many sleepless nights just because things just scale so fast, and nothing will prepare you for solving for something as important as payments. In today, for example, we have more than 50 million daily users, right? We had 50 million a month, I think, maybe quarter when we left Flipkart, and that was 5 years ago. So it's a testament to Rahul and the team, but larger product team and operating team. They managed to stay disciplined, but it's taken a lot of effort.
Samir, I want to ask you, how do you deliver great customer experience? And I have to call this out that I take autos and then somewhere मैंने पूछा कौन से लोगे तो PhonePe, and then to me that was a very good endorsement where even people who are using PhonePe, because they have choice today, we all know we all have choice, and I remember that they said PhonePe, and to me it talks about the product that you built and the scale that you've got. Is how do you deliver great customer experience?
I think there's the experience on the app, and then there's the experience of the app, right? The stuff that people don't see. I think on the app, a lot of startups, myself included, first couple of ventures, you think of design in terms of colors and fonts and stuff, but I think we spend a ton of time on what we call the information architecture. In fact, there's a lot of literature emerging now with super apps and multi-category players where they're saying, in fact, your entire strategy can be synthesized into your information architecture. What you see first is your core product. What you see second is your adjacent products. What you see 3 levels in is your tertiary products, because that's how users will discover them. If we were predominantly a mutual funds platform, mutual funds would be on the homepage and recharge would be on the third tab, right? So you have to continuously rationalize it. We spend a lot of time on the information architecture to make sure that customers know what we stand for at the core, and then guide them through the rest of it as well. Obviously, we want to upsell and cross-sell as much as we can in time, but you can't get away from your roots, at least not until 1 billion people are using digital payments, right? So that's one of the things that we spend a lot of time on. The second thing that people directly relate to is if they have an issue, how do they actually get that issue resolved? The best experience is not the call. The best experience is never having to call.
Yeah.
We did this thing, I think 2017, where for the first 6 months, we had contact us pages everywhere, and we had error messages and how to resolve them and FAQs on every page. It was a long, painful project. And what we said is, permanently, there'll be a question mark that builds muscle memory in users' heads that is anchored on the top right of the page. Most apps have a menu on the top left. We have a question mark on the top right. Any page you go to, if you click it, it'll give you contextual information. So if you're booking an Ola cab or ordering some Swiggy food on Switch, it'll give you results for that. If you're on insurance, it'll give you that data. So a customer knows, if I have a problem, where do I start?
Yeah.
You're not looking and sifting through for help. And when you do, the chat interaction is listening by language, and if you call, it's by language. So that's the customer experience, what I call out of the happy flow path. The third one, I think Rahul touched upon it, and I think he can talk about a lot more than me, is all of the intangible stuff that happens to make sure people don't have a bad experience in the first place. The kill switch is another stuff. I think you'll speak much better about that one.
Yeah, I think there is the aspect of consumer experience, which is tangible, and the intangible is where you try to predict what the experience is going to be, and if there is a suboptimal experience, you try to address it upfront. So basically getting into a mode of not taking customer resolution route, customer issue resolution, but take a route of actually preventing of the customer issue itself. So we have a concept of kill switch. Kill switch is a concept that is there across our product, which basically says that whatever the product, if in the path of the consumer experience, we believe that this is going to end up either with a possible failed transaction or with a possible fulfillment issue when the transaction is happening. It could be a recharge, it could be purchase of gold, any of it. We actually proactively stop that transaction. We tell the customer that it's probably not the right time to do it, and we actually get back to the consumer when it is actually back up, giving them an easy path to continue, right?
So we don't let people even initiate the payment. We stop you before you get there.
So
So we just say your bank is down, come back in 10 minutes.
Your bank is down, it could be
telco's
a
down.
partner that is probably not reachable, but also make sure that you close the loop, making sure that when things are okay, you get back to the consumer. Don't make them repeat all the steps, but let them start from where they probably stopped.
that's so
and continue,
important.
right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So it's kind of threading the journey up front and making sure that if there is going to be a hiccup, let's address it up front. It's better for the consumer.
Yeah.
They also appreciate it. So
Yeah.
it's not like you're losing the customer, you're actually gaining the customer
Yeah.
in that process.
Rahul, in fact, all of us in the last 3-4 years have seen so much of investment in startups in the fintech space, and now the mutual funds and insurance startups, lending startups, so many. I want to understand, how are you looking at that space? How is PhonePe looking at that space, especially now that digital is so ubiquitous in our country, and mutual funds and insurance people are looking at buying. And we heard some crazy numbers that with pandemic, the growth of insurance buying anyways in the country has increased. How are you looking at
So I
this?
think financial services, which includes insurance, mutual funds, we are all extremely excited about it. The good part about the kind of platform we laid with payments is that the digital distribution channel for financial services, which is a very strong adjacency to the payments journey, at least as we see it, is now laid. So we have this whole consumer strategy. We call it the send money, spend money, manage money, and grow money. So send and spend is all that we have actually achieved so far in terms of peer-to-peer money transfers, the ability to do your recharges, your bill payments, your QR scans for across the stores. I think that habit has been set. So now users who have adapted to the platform are now ready to actually manage and grow their money, which is about financial services. Protection through insurance, financial freedom in the future through investments, and possibly even getting your short-term loans
Lending,
through
So you're not going to
lending
leave
and
anything.
banking. No, but the opportunity really is for us to kind of rethink how financial services
Yeah.
have been done so far.
Yeah.
The primary reason that the right products don't reach the right people, whether it's insurance or mutual funds, is that the channel is very complicated. It's a physical channel where agents have to convince a person, and given that that reach isn't that large, it's always optimized towards the products that make possibly the maximum commission. What the digital distribution channel does is takes away that conflict of interest. You're able to take the right products to the right person. So personalization plays a huge role. So what we are genuinely excited about is to say that, does this person really need health insurance? And if so, what is the kind of health insurance, and kind of surface that, right? Even from a pricing perspective, because of the send and spend journey, you have a very clear idea about the purchasing power of the person, the kind of budgets that they may have, and to kind of tune the products to something that will meet their needs at that given point. Similarly, with investments, you can start curating a lot of the investments. Things like PMS, right, have been the products that have been available only to the advanced investors so far because they're fairly complicated.
Yeah.
But if you can think of a PMS from a layman's perspective as simply a set of the most basic curated mutual funds or even stocks, and explain it to the person and start with low ticket, what you're really doing is starting trials for the larger population who are probably investing for the first time into safer products, and then trying to graduate them at their risk capacity slowly into products that have higher risk but higher returns. So you're able to actually curate products, you're able to personalize experiences, and you're able to actually thread the journey for the consumer who's getting into financial services for the first time. us as a platform, given that 80% of our users and consumers are coming from tier 2 and tier 3, we see that as the biggest opportunity.
But Rahul, I have to ask you this, that this is a highly competitive space, right? And especially in our country, because while we talk about UPI and the growth and the huge user base, everyone is seeing this as the opportunity. And banks are now, as I know, I speak to the heads of banks today, they are also gearing up. How do you get a share of this pie? You have your own competitors, if I may say so. Everyone is looking at this. How are you saying that as PhonePe, you are best positioned to lead here?
I think one thing that PhonePe being a payments platform of the size and scale, the reach and scale that it is, means that there's already a very high level of trust with the platform when it comes to money. I think that's the key, right? Ultimately, if there is trust with the platform, and it's a huge responsibility. That trust comes with a very, very, very large responsibility that we take from the consumer's behalf, and therefore we will actually exercise it extremely judiciously. But that trust plays a key role in trying to actually get into financial services with the consumer. The second part is, I think, the amount of knowledge or information that we have about the user directly through the kind of transactions that they're doing on the platform plays also a very, very important role in the kind of products that we are able to actually recommend. So I think data and the trust that the platform has actually gained, I believe ultimately holds the edge when it comes to penetration of financial services in India.
Samir, what's going to be your playbook from here on? Because it has been a phenomenal playbook. You here with such huge user-based transaction, love, and as Rahul said, the trust of users. Now, what's going to be your playbook from here on as you scale for the Bharat, if I may say so?
We are more in Bharat than the metros today, just as user base. But I think the next 5 years, what got us here won't take us there. So we have gone through a relatively complex and large org redesign. Most of the existing leadership is going to be focused on carrying the payments vision forward, making sure we hit our next milestone is 500 million in 22. We'd said that a long time ago. We're still tracking. But we want to get to 800-900 million people in the next 8 to 10 years. Right? Whenever the market gets to them, we want to be there. We'll never lose sight of that vision. There's another team that's starting to look at all forms of innovation and platformization for merchants. Most people think of us on the consumer side. We have 21 million merchants who have an app. They have an interaction with us. They see transactions through it. So they need financial services. They can become agents for distributing other products. There's a lot to be done there. So that's another team or another business unit. And I think the third, which is the one we've been talking about, financial services, I think we're gonna go early stage on that one in terms of how we think about it.
Now, my next question to both of you is, that what has been your learnings? It has this journey. No journey is an easy journey or a straight line. But what has been, if you had to share with everyone today, what has been very significant, important, or learnings that stay with you in the journey that you've made?
In my 20s at startups, right, I actually just wanted to disrupt for the sake of disrupting and never thought about the business impact, societal impact, any of that stuff. And I think a lot of technology behemoths today, if you look at in the West, mirror that worldview. That's why there's a lot of friction with society today, right? What started as a great idea, everyone networking with their friends and family, when you start the monetization side of it, elections get swung. You never thought about that when you're starting out. When you start out with or when we were even at Flipkart, we were really, really excited about penetrating the market, trying to get e-commerce globally. But I think with payments this time, what's different? The one big learning was you're touching people's real money, and it is perhaps the most precious thing outside of family for people, and it's the livelihood, right? So I think this time we decided to take it much more thoughtfully, much more slowly. And I will say this, operating in a regulated environment first time in our lives has been humbling in many ways. Largely good, but you can't just move at your pace because you came up with an idea, product manager came up with an idea, the designer designed it, and you launch code. You have to get approvals to try out stuff. So there is a forcing function that limits the kind of disruption you can do. That's been very humbling, to be honest, because we are both inherently impatient. Because perhaps it is again because it's payments, we've learned, at least I've learned how visceral a reaction people have to anything related to money in a way that no other tech category really sort of evokes, right? Even with shopping, if the wrong item, the wrong dress or pair of jeans reaches home, you can return it. If money is gone for a bit, people get very anxious. And I think that we have to take a step back and really understand how to deal with this. That's why kill switches came in very early. When people are down money for a bit, even if it's 2 hours, the anxiety is so super high. So we're learning a very different set of tricks in this one. It's a completely different industry than anything we've dealt with. And I dare say I think financial services will be even more interesting that way.
Yeah, but I have to call out something very important in this conversation that you mentioned is about collaborating. And somewhere I think as Indians, and especially in the highly value or valuation driven startup ecosystem, collaborating with different kinds of players is something at least we've not seen happen at a significant level. And what you're saying is very, very interesting.
Again, to be honest, right, stage of life.
Yeah.
20s wouldn't come naturally because you're just out of college, you're conditioned to compete. You start up in your 40s, most people are asking you why. And you're like, okay, what's the motivation, right? But think about it, like look at our choices, right? If you wanted to build closed ecosystems that you could, launching with UPI as your first product would be perhaps the silliest choice you could have. Because by definition, every one of the banks on the network can compete and everybody else can compete and you don't need a regulatory license. Where's the moat? There's no moat, right?
Every merchant that has your QR code, any other app can be used to pay on it, right?
So 40% of our transactions, our users' transactions are on our QR, 60 are on third-party QRs, and the reverse is also true. Most of their transactions are on our QRs. If you went in with the view that you have to close the ecosystem, you can't build open platforms.
Yeah.
If we wanted to compete in every category, I think we would have access to that capital, right? We never tried or flexed that muscle, but if we wanted to raise money to get into, I don't know, food tech, ed tech, gaming, I'm sure we could have forayed into them.
Yeah.
We opened up the Switch platform and it's been 3 years in the making, but now we have 500 partners. I know your story is one of them. And its time will come. It's a slow bake, right? Because all of these apps in these categories are spending hundreds of millions of dollars disputing themselves. We will be able to slowly build out a lasting model.
Yeah.
We have a stores platform on the PhonePe app. We have digitized 20 million kiranas. They are all there. They use their PhonePe for Business app. They're uploading their menus. They're uploading their images. They're very, very proud entrepreneurs. There's D2C home brands. All of these have come up during COVID as well. They're all there. Is it driving a big part of transactions today? No. But are we sowing the seeds for massive, massive disruption in commerce at an India level? Yes. Because the fact is that 100 and some million people, 140, 150 million people every month are coming on PhonePe.
Yeah.
And if they're coming 10, 20, 30 times a month, at some point, just the bleed over into stores and Switch and insurance gives you a very good opportunity, right? I think we have stayed true to the idea of opening up the market to everyone, not competing for the sake of competing. There is no category we've entered, any bill payment category, we've not aggregated. We work with, what's the name of the gift aggregation company? We are a PPI, we are a gift card company. We sell third-party gift cards of a company owned by Amazon. We are in bill payments. We work with people who are all our direct competitors. There's Airtel Payment Bank and Jio Payment Bank. You can think of everyone as your competition in India because it's just such a closed system.
Yeah.
We think of everyone as our partners.
That's huge.
I think if you
It's
think of
liberating.
only
It's a
competition,
mindset, but
you
I'm
think of
just
only
saying.
competition, everybody's competition. If you think of saying that I own the consumer, you'd want to do everything yourself. I think breaking away from that. Like Switch and stores are our first mini version of a developer platform. Ideally, where we'd like to get to with our open platform philosophy is to actually build out a developer platform and open APIs that, through the kind of scale that we've seen, will allow new businesses to build on top of PhonePe,
Wow.
right? Top of our data. I think that's where we want to get to. I think that will be the real proof of the fact that we genuinely believe in keeping this as an open platform and an open ecosystem.
Wow, for me, this is the biggest takeaway from this conversation, what you're building. And I think that also builds to the PhonePe. Wow. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Very, very
Thank you.
inspiring conversation. And I'm sure everyone watching would agree with me. There was so much to learn. It felt like a very genuine, authentic, freewheeling masterclass. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Shraddha.
Thank you to all of you for tuning in. This was a very inspiring conversation.